Welcome to Bonn Park. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Marshall.
We're changing it up this week. Do you want to hear an episode of our other podcast?
An Unscripted Spectacle, Wrestling with Wrestling.
Here we go. Hi, I'm Sarah.
Oh, hi, I'm Chris.
And this is Marshall.
Yeah. And we are An Unscripted Spectacle, Wrestling with Wrestling.
That's us. That's our show.
Yeah. Big thank you to Colin Hunter of Kayfabe News for introducing us.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm so glad we're doing this.
Same. How do you know Colin?
I think it's just through, I did something with Kayfabe News.
Flip and Mart.
Oh, because now I get that. So you know that the premise of our show is I know nothing about wrestling. I'm starting to learn. Like I know what a people's elbow is. I asked Pat LaPrade what a suplex is. I found out what deathmatch wrestling is from Madman Pondo.
Yep.
Spoke to Lufisto about women in wrestling. I'm learning some stuff.
Yeah.
I'm learning some stuff.
Good, good.
But the whole show is that I don't know anything and I ask ridiculous questions. And Marshall is a true wrestling historian. He knows it all, like an encyclopedia.
Yeah. What I think is
you should write a book.
So refreshing about it is the fact that people in the wrestling business get to ask questions by Sarah that they don't normally get asked, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So that's our show.
So, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a bunch, but it's so funny explaining to wrestling to someone who's not familiar with wrestling.
Do you know what I find? There's always like a pause, especially when it's somebody kind of like I'm trying to think of an example of somebody like a Tyson Kidd, right?
Yeah.
Like just there's always a pause, and I'm like, so this aspect, like this little thing of wrestling, what is that? And there's like a little chuckle where they're like, oh, somebody doesn't know this world
also,
that we're
I think
entrenched in.
And it's explaining the absurdity of it.
Exactly.
Like that's the bigger thing.
Yeah, that's it.
That's
so
the beauty of
good.
Kayfabe News, right? Colin will write a whole kind of theoretical physics piece on bouncing off the ropes, right? In wrestling, which doesn't make sense to bounce on. Why is your body turning when you hit the ropes and bouncing back? Like that doesn't.
Why do you stomp when you punch?
Yeah.
The weird thing. You guys you're in Canada, right?
Yeah, we're in Waterloo.
You guys know I went to Laurier, right? Wow. Oh.
Did you know Michael Cito in communication studies?
Oh, the professor?
Yeah.
Yes, he was one of my professors.
Yeah, he's a great friend of mine, and we have made films together.
Wow.
Yep.
I can't. It's all such a blur. It's all such a vodka and beer filled, fuzzy 4 years of my life. But I can't remember what teacher he was of mine. But yeah, he was one of my professors.
Yeah, it's just down the street from here. We are walking distance or
Yes.
a short bike ride from Laurier, where we are right now.
Yeah.
I lived on Lodge Street.
Of course, right beside
Lodging
Marshall
Canada.
Street, actually.
Yeah.
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 1 block away.
Amazing. And you are not from KW though. You are
I'm from Pickering.
Pickering, right?
Yeah.
As
The cash man would say, Pickering, oh, Pickering.
The cash man, like the old
Cash
guy.
man.
Cash man. Oh yeah.
CP24.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it's like, why are you so sexual about trading your jewelry for money?
Yeah.
It's so disgusting. I guess money's hot. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Jewelry isn't. I don't get
He
jewelry.
likes to yell, Pickering, oh, Pickering.
Welcome to An Unscripted Spectacle, Wrestling with Wrestling. I'm Colin Hunter from Kayfabe News. Marshall is utterly obsessed with professional wrestling. Sarah is utterly perplexed by professional wrestling. On each episode of An Unscripted Spectacle, Marshall and Sarah talk with a different guest from the world of wrestling. Promoters, referees, journalists, and current and past stars of the Squared Circle to talk deeply about the strange magic of professional wrestling that has enchanted Marshall his whole life. Can they turn Sarah into a fellow connoisseur of professional wrestling? She'll need some convincing.
Chris Van Vliet, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for having me on. So good to talk to a fellow Canadian.
We had the best reception from you when the Zoom clicked in. You were like, hey,
Hey!
it's happening right now. Let's do this. I love the excitement and the enthusiasm.
I mean, why not? Why wouldn't you want to be excited about life?
I know. Why wouldn't you want to be? So, as you know, the premise of this show, I know nothing about wrestling, but I know you're not a wrestler.
This is true.
It's true?
This is. Could you tell that? Because I don't quite fill up the full Zoom screen here.
No. I think because I had a little insight from an intro email from Colin Hunter of Kayfabe News to me and Marshall saying, we think that, you should chat.
Yeah.
You should chat and get to know each other. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
There was a point in my life though when I did want to be a pro wrestler.
Let's talk about that from the beginning. Go. What was the inspiration?
I've known about wrestling my whole life. Of course, it was always there. Attitude Era. So we're talking like late 90s, became a huge wrestling fan. Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, like that, they really got me into it. So much of like what The Rock did during those formidable years of my life, I feel like really influenced my life. Like do you know the "It Doesn't Matter" line in wrestling?
No, I know.
It doesn't matter if you know the "It Doesn't Matter" line.
I don't get it. Why? What is this?
That's what The Rock would do. He would say, he'd pose a question.
Yeah.
Like, who in the blue hell are you? And someone would go to answer that question.
Yeah.
And he would do exactly what Chris just did there.
Okay.
So like cut you off and yell at you. So
if I said like, why were you interested in wrestling? Oh, but I was
interested in wrestling because, and then you would cut me off.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is in conjunction with the elbow?
Yeah. The Rock had a whole pile of things that kind of fell under this kind of bully-like persona, wouldn't you say, Chris?
Yeah,
he was
it's funny that in hindsight now, 20 plus years later, he was like this arrogant bully, but he had these fun things that people could say along with him, and it made him like this incredibly likable guy because he was so charismatic. But it's funny in hindsight, like this is the whole thing about the Attitude Era. In hindsight, it all sounds really great. Because I feel like we put on like the rose-colored glasses. When you watch it back like week to week, or when you were like watching it, like you knew that every Rock promo, he was gonna say, finally, The Rock has come back to Into the Name of City. Then he was gonna take an object, turn it sideways, shine it up real nice, and then stick it straight up someone's candy ass. He said that in every promo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was candy ass. I've heard this before, and I don't think I understand what a candy ass is.
Very strange explaining this to someone who doesn't like wrestling, that The Rock was taking inanimate objects and shoving them up other men's anuses. Like that was,
or threatening to.
Well, yeah.
Oh, yeah, wait, there was actual shoving, or was it just always implied that there was going to be shoving?
There's a lot of
talk of bums on this show. Like Brian Blair talked a lot about sticking things in
Brian Blair
bum.
Stuck a pencil up Paul Orndorff's bum, and there's that whole Tales from the Territories new show. Every show, there's somebody had an eyeball pop out, or something was stuck up somebody's bum. I'm waiting for like an eyeball to be shoved up somebody's bum.
That doesn't. Rey Mysterio only has one eyeball, and somehow magically he grew his other eyeball back.
That's right.
That's oh man.
Okay, wait. Let's backtrack to the point.
Did you ever do any off track here?
We're in butts now. We can't turn around from butts now. Did you ever do any wrestling training, or you were just interested?
Yeah. So I was a backyard wrestler when that was a really big thing in the late 90s. People had these backyard wrestling federations. So I had a backyard wrestling federation. I was the 2-time HCW champion, Chris Sharp, and he was very much inspired by The Rock and also a little bit of Triple H. Like Triple H would tape his right hand and his right wrist and then just his left wrist, and I would do that. So then when I was like, that was in high school, and when I was in college, I said to one of my best friends, I said, all right, we are going to go to wrestling school. Like this is happening. And I did. I ended up training in Toronto at a wrestling school called the Squared Circle in between the summer of my second and third year at Wilfrid Laurier. And I was really enjoying it, but I had this moment where I was driving like about almost an hour to wrestling school. And I had a moment when school started back up, like school. And I was like, all right, I got to decide here. Like, I got to do one thing or the other. It's either wrestling school or school. And I was like, I'm going to get my degree because wrestling will kind of always be there. And now I'm fortunate that I get to dip my toe into the water as an interviewer and as a ring announcer. But, I'm 39 now, and I look at all my other friends who are 39 and pro wrestlers, and, I don't hurt nearly as much when I get out of bed in the morning. And I'm really happy about that.
We hear there's a lot of unaddressed injuries for wrestlers across the board, across the decades. They just sort of like, I'll be fine.
And I think it might be just like the fear of like, well, if I stop wrestling now to like really fully heal that up, then I'm out of the picture, and maybe the storyline that I was working on is not interesting anymore. And I feel like for a lot of people, that would just be like, really hurting themselves in hurting their career rather than physically hurting themselves, which is probably what they still do.
I'm mesmerized by your voice. Your voice is lovely to listen to. That must be the whole.
It's just a great microphone. Really good microphone.
Mine's not bad either because you get the full cackle. Sorry about that. Apologies. It comes out a lot.
The Squared Circle Wrestling School in Toronto. So that would be Ron Hutchinson?
That was El Fuego.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Ron Hutchinson was one of my first introductions to independent wrestling. I didn't even know independent wrestling existed. I only thought it was WWF and WCW. And then I found out about AWF, which was Apocalypse Wrestling Federation. It was in Scarborough at this bar called Cactus Pete's. Yeah. And you'll like this, Marshall. I saw Gail Kim's debut there. She was wearing a mask, wrestling under the name La Felina. And It was like this. They had amazing wings there, and I love chicken wings. By the way, could you guys save me some Morty's wings? Oh, that's the biggest thing I miss about Waterloo.
Oh, you probably know my cousin Sam Flyzik was a bartender there for ages.
I was there every Monday on wing night.
All right, I'll tell her you said hi.
But the ceiling in Cactus Pete's was so low that you couldn't jump off the top rope. You had to jump off the middle rope.
Yeah.
So Ron Hutchinson ran that company.
What took you to LA, and what kind of life have you carved out for yourself down there that you couldn't have had up here in Southern Ontario?
I just think that there's a lot more opportunities here. Like there's
for
a lot
the
more
specific work.
There's just a lot more cities here, really. Like when you're growing up, I was so fortunate to grow up in and around Toronto. So that's the biggest, one of the biggest cities in North America, the biggest city in Canada. When you want a job in broadcasting and you want to work in media, that's the place you want to be. I feel like I was really fortunate to grow up next to that. But I feel like if you grew up anywhere else in Canada, you would want to try to get to Toronto because that was where the stuff was happening. But long story short, I had a job in Vancouver. I was hosting a show on MTV2 Canada. That show ended up getting canceled when Chum got bought out by CTV way back in the day. So I basically drove my car back from Vancouver to Toronto, moved back in with my parents when I was 24 years old, and was like, well, what do I do now? Like, what kind of job am I going to have? And I applied for all of these different jobs, and it would be between me and one other person, me and two other people, and it would go to somebody else. And at that point, I was like, I got to look for a job elsewhere. If I can't work in my own country, I got to work somewhere else. And that's when I got a job. Or that's when I got an agent based in LA. And that kind of started the wheels in motion. But it was in 2010 when I moved to Cleveland. I was an entertainment reporter for CBS in Cleveland. Then I moved to Miami and I hosted a show on Fox in Miami. And then 2.5 years ago, I moved to LA.
An Unscripted Spectacle is brought to you by Kayfabe News, the gold standard for unreal news about an unreal sport. You literally won't believe their hard-hitting journalism on all the topics the mainstream dirt sheets are afraid to cover. Follow Kayfabe News on social media and get your own Kayfabe News shirts and masks at ProWrestlingTees.com.
And when we're a communication student at Wilfrid Laurier, you couldn't possibly have pictured this. You probably don't look too far ahead and you think, well, whatever the first thing that comes along looks good, I'll take that and see if I can go further. Is that how it works?
I was always passionate about broadcasting. In fact, I had a Fisher-Price tape recorder with cassette tapes when I was 4 years old. I know the one
you mean with the coil to the microphone.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one.
And I would pretend to be the radio DJs that I heard on the radio. Amazing. And I knew that I was always passionate about it. And when I was in high school, I was the student vice president of the student council because they got to do the morning announcements. And we had a communication studies class at my high school where I was able to learn all the different parts of working a TV station, like audio and camera and VTR and all that stuff. But I was always really drawn to hosting. And I hosted the talent show and the fashion show at my high school. But I just love the idea of being able to hold a microphone and elicit a response out of people. So I knew that was what I always wanted to do. It seemed like a long shot, but I went to school for communication studies, went to Laurier for communication studies. And I woke up one day in my fourth year and it was September, the end of September, my fourth year. And it hit me so hard that, oh my God, when we graduate at the end of this year, we have to go work for, the rest of our lives. And I was having the best time there. I lived with 4 of my best friends, and
Lodge Street.
We lived on Lodge Street. It was a 30-second walk to school. It was Phil's on Wednesday night.
Oh,
it was
Phil's.
the Turret on Thursday.
Dollar beers on Sundays and 80s music. Miss it.
Oh yes, we basically went out like Wednesday to Sunday.
Yep.
And you would decide if 10 a.m. was too early to go to class, and most oftentimes it was. So it was in that moment when I was like, I just don't want to hate my job when I graduate. I want to be able to enjoy what I do. And that was when I reached out to every radio station and every TV station in Kitchener-Waterloo and said, can I just come in and see how it's done in the real world? And that got the ball rolling. And I was like, okay, well, if I can do this, what else can I do?
Yeah.
And
passionate.
When you do get somewhere, like when you're backstage for the first time at a WWE event or something, is it kind of like, so here it is. It's real. You know what I mean? Like, in terms, if you watch Monday Night Raw or whatever, you get some backstage footage, and they put name on like a ad hoc office kind of thing. You know what I mean? And catering looks amazing, and everything's well lit. But does it feel like that when you actually arrive to a place in real life and you're like, wow, I'm actually here doing this job?
There is definitely a moment where you're like, this is the thing I saw on TV, whether that's backstage at Raw, whether it's backstage at AEW, whether it's the red carpet at the Oscars, whether it's, getting a handshake or a hug from someone like The Rock. Like, it's like, oh, I've seen this on TV. Now it's happening. Now I'm experiencing it. Mm-hmm. I will say that when you're backstage at a wrestling show, they make it look a lot more glamorous on TV. That's for sure. Like, you realize you're in like the bowels of some, hockey or basketball arena. And they've basically taken some janitor's closet and made it somebody's dressing room, or they've taken, another small room and made it catering or something like that. But it looks really good on TV. But I will say with all of that, there's definitely those moments where you kind of have to like commit it to memory and go, this is the thing that I was aspiring to do. This is the place that I want. Yeah, I'm here. Now what's next?
Mm-hmm. I relate to that what's next so much. Marshall has to deal with that with all of our creative projects together. It's never good enough to be like, I appreciate what we do. I appreciate what we accomplish. I'm proud of the work that we do together, but it's always what's next. And it's not for success or accolades. It's for like, I want to try more things. I want to learn more things. I want to make more things.
Yeah, I hear you. And every time I talk to somebody who's won an Oscar or won a Super Bowl or won some sort of championship, they're like, yeah, it was cool. Like, I got home with the award. And then I went, all right, well,
what's next?
Gotta go back to work tomorrow. Like, keep going.
Unless they were at Morty's or Phil's for the whole night.
Oh man, Phil's was great because it opened at 9, but they didn't start charging cover till 9:30.
Yep.
So my friends and I
was sorry, I'm totally talking over you and I'm such a jerk. I was part of the reason why I wore such like high Doc Martens or army boots was to wade through the overflow bathroom water in that joint. And you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, of course.
So gross.
So my friends and I would run over there at like 9:25, get the stamp so we wouldn't have to pay the $5 cover. And by the way, drinks were $1.75. We would go in, make like one lap, and then leave, go free drink at home for the next 2.5 hours, and then come back at like 12:30 or something like that.
Come back when it's cracking. That's awesome. I gotta redirect back to wrestling though. Like I what I'm realizing with this show, and this is maybe what episode or recording number, we're getting close to 30 or something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
For this show. But what I'm realizing is that when people have this childhood passion for wrestling, it never leaves them. They never abandon it. It's never like, oh yeah, I like that when I was young. It's lifelong.
There's like, I also think that like, it's one of those things. It's kind of that scene in Step Brothers. Like, did we just become best friends?
Oh my God, I love that scene.
Like when you find out that somebody else likes wrestling, and not just like in a casual sense, but they like wrestling, like
Secret
you
Club.
have an instant bond. Yeah, you may have nothing else in common with that person, but you are now their best friend.
Amazing. Do you know the scene?
It's interesting though. I don't think. And Marshall, I wonder if you'll agree with this. Wrestling's kind of cyclical. Like you'll be all about it, watching everything, Raw and SmackDown and Dynamite and Rampage. And then there's a point in time when maybe you're just off it a little bit. And I feel like it goes in a circle where like, it's a lot to watch. And I feel like sometimes you're really in it, and then sometimes you're in it, but you're not like in it.
Yeah, do I tell Chris your secret?
that I'm an unwavering fan who like consumes it every single day.
Since you were 11 years old?
Yeah.
So it doesn't apply to him.
But I do know what you're talking about. And for me, it's amazing because, if I wasn't thrilled with what I'm seeing on Raw or SmackDown, I go over to AEW, and I remember why I love blood so much in wrestling. If I want to see more blood, I'll just watch my DVDs from the Caribbean in the 80s or Japan, right? And or death matches. And Sarah and I were talking about how we had podcaster and wrestling fan Kevin Gill on our show a little while ago, and he described wrestling as a violence wrapped as a gift, right? And I really like that idea.
Oh, it's backwards.
Oh,
can I correct you? It's a present wrapped in violence.
Oh yeah, it's a present wrapped in violence.
That's what you said.
Do you enjoy the more extreme violence aspects of wrestling? Like I love if AEW gives me a bloody dog collar match, like I absolutely love that. I never tire of lots of blood and extreme violence. How about you?
Before I answer this question, Sarah, was it surprising when you learned that wrestlers cut their own head open with a razor blade?
Yeah. So I had years ago seen the movie The Wrestler, and I thought, this guy is weird. What is this? Like, why this one individual is cutting his face? And I had no idea that it was a real thing. And I had no idea about Juice the Hard Way. And I had no idea that like there's hidden razors. And I had to get Madman Pondo to explain to me what a saw bat was and why on God's green earth he would staple his own tongue.
Yeah.
Like I'm just getting a little bit worked up just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yes, I was very surprised to answer your question.
Well, and now to answer Marshall's question, I love that wrestling runs the gamut. Like I love that on the same card where you can have high flyers that are doing things that do not seem humanly possible. The next match can be guys that are just like tearing it up and leaving the ring a crimson mess. Like I love that. I just love that it runs the gamut of that. So I think that it's great that you can kind of pick and choose it. Wrestling's a buffet. Wrestling is a buffet. And when you get a great card, you get a little bit of everything. You get a little bit of salad, you get a chicken, you go to the chocolate wonderful if we're talking about Golden Corral over here. And I love that that's all encompassing in wrestling.
It's like a huge variety show, right? It guarantees will deliver. Colin Hunter did this Kayfabe news story that Sarah saw where it said, WrestleMania, right? Like the Super Bowl, but not boring, right?
That I understood.
Yeah.
That I got, that joke.
Because WrestleMania comes around and there's it's guaranteed to deliver something.
To entertain you.
Yeah, to be pretty good.
Yeah.
Whereas if any football game can just kind of, any sporting event can just kind of fall short, right? Because it's a competitive real life thing, right? But wrestling
one of my favorite things is going to a live wrestling show with someone who's not a wrestling fan or bringing them for the first time. Like I took my fiance about a year ago to her first live wrestling show. And it's just, there's something that's so fun about being like, oh yeah, we're going to boo this guy. We don't like this guy. And then when this guy says this thing, we're going to say this thing. And like, there's something so fun about that.
I've seen The Rock in person from quite close, and it's really something. I've also heard wrestlers talk about how, if you're backstage somewhere and Dwayne Johnson comes around the corner, like it's everybody's eyes are on him. Like just you're in the presence of something with enormous amounts of charisma, and it's like he's illuminated from within. People have said, is that your experience being around Dwayne Johnson?
It's just the way that he sees people. Like he makes space and time for everybody, no matter who you are. And that is such a rare quality in anybody, let alone, the biggest star in the world. Like I've interviewed him now 10 times, not that I'm counting or anything, but I interviewed him recently about a month ago for Black Adam. And I was in the hotel where he was doing press. I was going to do an interview on a Saturday. He was doing the interviews like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I was in that hotel on the Friday. I was just kind of hanging around with my buddy Jake. And he goes, hey, the Rock's security guy's over there. If we hang here for a minute, I bet the Rock's going to walk by. It's like, oh, cool. It'd be great to see him. And I literally meant to see him like from afar walking by. He walked by. He happened to see us and he walks over. Jake, Chris, how you guys been? I haven't seen the Rock in person in 4 years. And the fact that he made that time and he goes, hey, you still living in Florida? I'm like, my goodness. Like, how do you remember?
I mean, I think like, did you blush? I would blush.
I just couldn't. I was like, I would, yeah. I was like that the whole time. And then the next day when I did interview him, he really makes time. And I told him that I was going to be a father for the first time. And he gave me this amazing advice. And there was a moment where I was like saying it and I was getting choked up, and he like immediately stood up and gave me a hug. And I'm just like, man, who is this human? Like, and how does he have this much self-awareness? Like he's aware that he's the biggest star in the world, but he's even like one level more aware that this is a big moment for you. And you're going to remember this and you're going to tell everybody about it on a podcast just like this. And he includes you into the moment. He'll say something that makes you go, wow, like, oh, you've been working out, or appreciate that I had a pocket square one time. Look at you dressed up for him. This is so great. And there's just something about him that, there's a reason that he's the biggest star in the world. And they say you shouldn't meet your heroes, but if your hero is Dwayne Johnson, do whatever you can to meet him.
I love that.
Sarah knows there's a sad and darker side to wrestling for sure. Dwayne Johnson to me represents the complete opposite of something that makes me incredibly sad. Whereas some of my wrestling heroes, I would describe it like this: it's like they're out in the ocean and they're holding on to a life preserver that they think is saving them, but it's actually killing them, right? Because they won't let that identity go, and they can't seem to just go home and be a normal person, right? They are so desperate, to
You're talking about anyone specific?
To stay out there. Well, I think about
I think that when you say that, every wrestling fan just immediately starts thinking of like half a dozen people.
Yeah.
And I don't want to name any names here, but I think that there's something in wrestling where when you taste that crowd reaction, that is a drug that is irreplicable. Wow.
We'll take it.
Wow. You just can't replace it with anything else. And I think a lot of people try. And I think that that's where that dark path that they go down, they try with drugs and alcohol, but I don't think there's anything that can ever replace that. And it's this strange mix of it's athleticism and it's sport. And because of the fact that it's sport, you can't do it forever. And I think that a lot of people get into it in their 20s and don't know anything else. And then they're trying throughout their 20s to try to make a name for themselves. Some of them do, some of them don't. And I think that either way, whether you make it or you don't, I think a lot of people just hang on to that crowd reaction, that visceral feeling that you get. And The Rock is a great example of someone who took what he did in the wrestling world and then built on it. Dave Bautista is another great example of that. John Cena is a great example of that. Diamond Dallas Page is a great example of that. But I think that there's something to be said about like holding on to that life preserver, like you said, like hanging on to something for too long. You know that your body can't do it, yet you don't know how to do anything else.
Your buddies from Laurier, when you have a chance to correspond with them, they must say things to you like, you look like you're having an absolute blast with your career, with adventure around every corner. And not that it doesn't come with a ton of pressure and stress, I'm sure, especially when the camera's rolling. But what is it you say back to them when they say, wow, you like completely knocked it out of the park, Chris?
I mean, that's very nice of you to say. I just think that I'm still working every single day to like, just be excited for what I'm going to do at the start of the day and then be proud of what I've done at the end of the day. And I just think that for me, I really dreamed big and I dreamed things that I didn't think were possible. As you guys know, like when you live in Canada, working in the US seems like a very difficult thing to accomplish. And I feel like I've been really fortunate to be able to do that. But I just feel like we're just getting started. Like I'm like 17, 18 years into working in broadcasting. I'm like, oh, I've got probably 30 more to go. Like, so we're like, this is like the third, this is basically the end of the first quarter, essentially, maybe halfway through the second quarter. So I don't know. I just feel really grateful for all the opportunities that I've had. And I've been doing a thing recently where when something really awesome is happening, I like take a moment to like, let it sink in. Yeah. Like I was at the world premiere of the new Glass Onion movie, the new Knives Out movie. So I was at the world premiere with two of my best friends and we just kind of looked around and I just took it all in, the sights, the sounds, the smells. And I wanted that to like be a core memory that like stayed in my brain that I could access at another point in time. So many people are, driving around with no map.
Yeah.
They don't even know where they're headed. They're just like, well, we'll see what's around this corner. We'll see what's around that corner. And sure, that might work for a little while, but you should at least have a destination in mind.
Bonn Park is made possible with the support of the Waterloo Region Community Foundation, the Kitchener Public Library, our local sponsors, and you, our loyal listeners.
We make this show in Sarah's kitchen. If you like it, please rate and subscribe.
That helps us get the word out to more listeners.